This guy, man. This guy, man. Talking.
You ready, Nafiz? Bismillah.
Taking questions from local disciples?
Sure. What's the rule on drinking directly from the bottle? Is that from the Sunnah? Is there a hadith on that? Drinking min fam siqa, from the mouth of the skin. Huh. There's an issue we were discussing back in the day in Yemen. Someone at Tulab al-Ibn with the Sheikh of the Markaz there. Is it permissible to drink from a water bottle? Directly. Like, fadl Nafis.
Initials F. Ali from London, UK. What's ruling on forgetting the Quran and narrations of a hadith due to negligence? Plus, unrelated question, what is the ruling on breastfeeding?
طيب. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, Mufti Q&A book 2, Walillahi alhamd, is printed, published and printed, Walillahi alhamd. It was a lot of sacrifice that was put into the book by the volunteers. Okay, many volunteers, notably from among them, the disciples of Canada, Toronto and surrounding areas of Toronto, Ontario, Walillahi alhamd. My students, they put in a lot of work in a short period of time to produce the book. So may Allah reward them well on my behalf. And inshallah ta'ala, hopefully this second volume will be a means of benefit and a means of enlightenment and a means of reminding all of us. Tayyib, khair inshallah. With regards to the question, the ruling on forgetting the Quran or Quranic ayat and hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of negligence, etc. Some of the ulama of Islam, they say that forgetting the Quran is a sin. And they say that it's a sin because a person only forgets the Quran when he abandons it, and when he neglects it, and when he doesn't pray at night, and he unfortunately has lengthy periods of time in which he's far from the Quran. And they say for someone to read the Quran and review it and to pray with it and to invoke Allah therewith is very difficult, if not impossible, for him to what? Forget the Quran. Alright? And there are hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ forbade us to say that we forgot the Quran and we have forgotten the Quran. Alright? So therefore, a Muslim, a student of knowledge, a scholar who abandons the Quran and neglects the Quran and then forgets is a musibah, is a calamity. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And like we mentioned in our last khutbah, the concept of something is taken from you, you may try to get it back, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it back. It doesn't necessarily mean that Allah will give it to you a second time. So we have to be mindful of that. With regards to Allah allowing you to study and to memorize, to learn the Arabic language, and you don't put it to use. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. As far as the second question, what is the ruling on breastfeeding? Then feeding the child is from the rights of the child upon the mother and the father. The mother and the father. Obviously, the father is not going to give the milk, but it's the father's job to provide for the woman. And it's the father's job to provide a wet nurse if he has to. If the woman's milk is insufficient. If her milk is insufficient, or if she's physically incapable of feeding the child, then the father has to provide and give the necessary wealth and support to provide a wet nurse or wet nurses. Even if they're divorced. Even if they're not together and they're divorced, the husband has to pay money to provide for the woman feeding the child. And if she can't feed the child, someone else that can feed the child. So therefore, it is from the rights of the baby upon his or her parents. And it should not be left off. It should not be neglected and abandoned. And obviously, we know that our faith and our practice of this religion is not based off of science and what scientists say or specialists say or people in the modern age say. We believe whether they agree with it or not. But from the things which add to our certainty, Nurun ala nur, Allah says, لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي, for my heart to be at rest. Ibrahim alayhi salam, who broke the idols, he said this. modern physicians, doctors, and specialists, they say that the child that is fed through his or her mother's natural milk, in most cases, is smarter, healthier, stronger than a child that's fed through other sources, artificial milk, or even someone else's breast milk. They say that the child is going to be smarter, stronger, and there's going to be a greater and stronger relationship and bond between the child and the mother that is fed from the breast of the mother. All right, and we know that Allah Azza wa Jal, He is Al-Alim al-Hakim. He knows all. He's all wise, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows what His slaves need and what His slaves, what will do good for them and what will do harm to them. Allah ya'lamu man khalaqa wa huwa latif al-khabir. Allah says, does the one who created not know? And He is al-Latif, al-Khabir. And His wisdom in these two names being mentioned. Allah is Latif, He's kind, He's subtle, He's tolerant, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge encompasses all subtleties, that which is Latif. And He's Khabir, He's aware of what is going on, what is going to take place, what took place, what would have taken place, even though it didn't take place. Azza wa Jal. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows what's best for His servants. So therefore, the child should be breastfed. And obviously, there are women who may not want to breastfeed the child for fear that it will do harm to their body or cause damage to their physical body, to their breast, etc. Yani, at the end of the day, you have to pick. You have to pick. You have to prioritize. What do you want? You want this or you want that? And Allah knows best.
This is MM from Somaliland. What is your advice for someone who feels like they are being abused by their parent? Keep in mind, this person has advised their parents and it went horribly.
Question comes from Somaliland, Somalia. What advice would you give to someone who feels that they're being abused by their parents? They've advised their parents several times, but the advice has went horribly. First and foremost is, it depends what you mean by abuse. If there's someone that's physically harming you, damaging you, causing you major emotional pain and scarring you, then you should leave that location. If someone is abusing you and beating you up or molesting you or doing some major harm to you, leave them, even if they're your parents. Get out of that situation. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't put on a soul more than that soul can bear. Allah does not burden a servant more than a servant can bear. And there should be no harm in the religion. Alright? As far as if the abuse isn't to that level, or if it's something which is bearable, it's something which isn't all of the time, then try to speak to someone who has, as we said, a louder voice. Speak to someone whom your parents may be afraid of or scared of, or they may revere, or they may respect more than you. Try your best to speak to an uncle or a grandfather or the sheikh of a village or the city of the town, something. And if it doesn't work and they continue to abuse you and to do harm to you and to beat you up, then there's no sin upon you, as I said, in you leaving and fleeing, because that's unbefitting of a believer to hit another believer. It's unbelieving for a Muslim to hit a Muslim in a manner that is not from the Quran and the Sunnah. This person makes the prayer. This woman wears hijab and you hit them, you beat them, you abuse them. That's unbefitting of a believer. That's unbefitting of a parent. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He clearly tells us in the Quran al-Kareem, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ, to worship Allah and only Allah, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and to be kind to your parents. And Allah, He explains to us why we should be kind to our parents and why we have to respect them and to obey them. كَمَا رَبَّيَانِ صَغِيرًا, and say, oh my Lord, have mercy on them just like they raised me when I was little. So this goes to show that the wisdom behind respect and benevolence and kind treatment of one's parents is what they did for you when you were little. So if someone is not treating you in that manner and they're not giving you your basic rights, then unfortunately they lose their what? Their basic rights. So if it's a means of necessity and the person is harming you and doing major damage to your physical body or your spirit or your mind, there's no sin in you leaving if there's no one that can fix the situation and if there's no one who can alter the situation and take control of the situation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best.
Initials OS from Colombia. Assalamu alaikum. What is the ruling on using emojis of humans and animals?
Question comes from where?
Colombia, MO.
Colombia, MO. What state is that? Missouri, you checked it? طيب. What is the rule on using emojis of humans and animals? If you have doubt, then don't use them. Stay away from them. It's more than enough. People have been communicating and living for years before what? Emojis. If you feel this haram or doubtful or disliked, then what? Stay away from it. It's that simple. Next question.
Initial TB from Albany, New York. Assalamu alaikum, beloved Sheikh. Hope your haircut is sharp as your football. What is the ruling on buying/paying a mortgage on a house?
طيب. Question comes from Albany, New York. Albany. We say Albany. New York. With regards to the ruling on buying a house, on mortgage, etc. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah bless you. Thank you very much for your kind words. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us better and allow us to deliver more authentic information to you in a sharper manner. And I do need a haircut. With that being said, this issue has been discussed, it has been researched, and it has been studied by many people. Scholars and researchers, specialists, economists, financial experts in the East and in the West on riba in general, usury, interest, banking, investing, buying and selling, trading, stocks, bonds. All of these issues have been discussed in detail. And the issue of the house specifically has been discussed and has been researched because having a house is a means of necessity. Where you live, where you stay, shelter is a necessity, not necessarily a house. Shelter is a necessity of the human being. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in several ayat how He blessed His servants and He gave them places to stay and means of shelter. As we said, whether it's a tents that are light and easily constructed, easily erected and easily deconstructed and taken with you. Allah mentions this in Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16. Allah Azza wa Jal, He talks about the creation of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam and the creation of Hawa, of Eve, quote unquote. لِيَسْكُنَ إِلَيْهَا, for him to have sakina in her. And the word for a house in Arabic language could be bait, it could be manzil, or it could also be maskan. You understand this? Similar meaning. Your house is supposed to be tranquil. Your house is supposed to be calm. Your house is supposed to keep you safe. It's supposed to protect you. And the list goes on. And the list, what? It goes on. So having a house, having somewhere to stay, having shelter is a basic need of the human being. And it's a major blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, is it permissible for me to get a house on mortgage, or do I have to rent? Do I have to just rent for all of my life and pray for the best? The ulama of Islam, the fuqaha, they've discussed these different issues, when it is and when it isn't permissible. A person has nowhere to live, nowhere to stay, that's one thing. Now, a person has a mortgage which is somehow Islamically compliant, that's what? That's one thing. A person is involved in a mortgage and paying mortgage with or through the landlord. Your landlord says to you, is it possible that you give me 2 months of rent? Because I'm finishing my mortgage. You know that you're paying a mortgage. It isn't hidden. The landlord is telling you he does not own the what? House. And you pay rent every month. Is that permissible? And some people say that's haram for you to yourself to pay the mortgage and that the kafir pay the mortgage and you just give him the money. Or a Muslim pay the mortgage. Is that consistent fiqh? You have to be mindful of this, okay? So at the end of the day, if you have the money to buy the house, that's what you should do. At the end of the day, if you have the money, if you have the ability to invest your wealth lawfully, clearly, lawfully, and avoid these things, that is the best thing that you should do. As far as if it is a necessity, and only Allah knows what is and what isn't a necessity, as far as if a person does not consider this to be the actual riba mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, that's a different story. If you yourself can research, you research. If you cannot research, then you take the fatwa of those ulama whom you trust and whom you respect. Whom you trust and whom you respect. And many of them have stated what I've just stated, that you cannot have a house on mortgage. You cannot do that because it involves many impermissible dealings and transactions. And some of them say it's best for you to rent a small apartment or have an apartment or to pay month to month than deal with the haram riba. And obviously there are researchers and there are muftis And there are people who have detailed views with regards to having a mortgage. At the end of the day, brothers and sisters, if we pay mortgage or if we don't pay mortgage, it's a major issue in the West. Okay, a major issue. There are websites that you can research. Amja, they've discussed this in detail. You can go on their website. They've discussed this in Arabic and in English in detail. Amja. Okay, the fiqh, the jurists of the United States of North America, they've discussed this in detail. And other ulama as well. Other ulama and fuqaha in the United States, in Canada, they've discussed it, as I said, what? In detail as well. The bottom line is, stay away from it if you can. If it's not a necessity, you shouldn't do it. That's the best advice that I could give you. But we have to realize, if we don't pay mortgage, then there are other things that we're going to pay that are haram. Whether it's taxes, or whether it's having our money in a checking account, a savings account, a debit card. Everyone understand this? And all other things that we have to face living in these Western countries and in the Eastern countries in the modern world today. The hadith that states, a day will come or time will come in which the dust of riba will touch everyone. Even if you're not eating the riba directly, it's dust. يَمَسُّهُ غُبَارُهُ. It's dust will fall on you. The hadith is not authentic. It's not authentic hadith. But some of the ulama of today, they say that the hadith, its meaning is totally authentic. Some of them, they say that it's what? Totally authentic meaning. That the riba has become so widespread. Ammat wa tammat. In which if you're not eating it directly, it's scratching you and touching you and grabbing you. And this is oftentimes the issue of mortgage. So if you avoid the mortgage, then there's what? Other issues and other problems that you're paying and receiving that are impermissible. Leasing, loaning, and the list goes on. Nah? So we have to fear Allah to the best of our ability. And the last piece of advice I would give with regards to the issue of mortgage is that we have to be mindful, like I said last night and the night before, about what do we own as Muslims. And how long will we rent? How long will we have our hands out begging and asking from non-Muslims or from people who don't share our views and our values? How long will it be? It's a serious question that we have to ask ourselves. Will we be left behind 20, 30, 40, 50 years with nothing? Is it possible to make something halal with making some sacrifices in the beginning? For the long-term goal, this has to be taken into consideration. I would understand this. You rent for 30 years and you have what? Nothing. The landlord says, my son is getting married. I need you to move out. I'm selling the building. I'm this, I'm that. I need you to leave. And you paid rent for all of those years and you move on to another apartment. And your children, I'm not saying the riba, I'm not saying that. I'm just getting for everyone to do what? Be mindful of the reality and to think critically. To think critically. At the end of the day, there are details with regards to mortgage. There are details. I don't think that a person can go say you can just do it and it's 100% halal. And I don't think that every situation is always haram. But there are situations and scenarios. Obviously, a question like this, you have to tread very what? Carefully. For several reasons. First and foremost, forget what people say or people think or people listening. But you're signing off on Allah. Like Ibn al-Qayyim said, "I'lam al-muqin." This is Allah's deen. It's not an easy thing. Saying what's halal and what's haram. Second of all, we have to be mindful. Somebody says, oh, he said it's permissible for me to get mortgage. I'm going to buy a house, I'll go pay mortgage right now. And others may say, oh, look, he's giving a fatwa. He said it's mortgage. A'udhu billah, haram. We have to be mindful of this. So that's the best answer that I could possibly give. And the same applies to credit cards. The same applies to other things as well. In which there has to be a what? A balanced detail. But that balanced detail has to be based off of critical and realistic thinking. And not living in a fantasy world or a dream world. The last thing I would say, when I was in Yemen, there was some tulab al-ilm in the masjid one day. And they were talking about having a debit card. Not a credit card, but a debit card. And for the brothers that were traveling to Sa'da and then going to Damaj, obviously there were no ATMs there. You couldn't, get any money sent from home. Your wife is sick, you need food, you need books, whatever. So the brothers that traveled from Sana'a to Sa'da, they would take the money with them. And whenever they needed money or it was an emergency, they would send trustworthy Yemenis back to the capital or to other cities with their debit cards. And they would pay them a fee for doing it and they would bring back the money, right? So some of the brothers, they were discussing this and saying this is haram. You can't use a debit card. Because using a debit card, the debit card is attached to the bank, the percentage, the riba, etc. You can't use it. Even if you're not taking it, it's haram. Everyone understand this? Now, put that on pause for a second. Let's talk about a credit card. There are certain fatwas of ulama and fuqaha who say that you cannot have a credit card. Absolutely. Even if you don't pay the interest or the late fee, whatever they call it. I have $1,000 credit. I spend $999 and I immediately what? Pay it back. I'm not paying no riba. Some of those ulama, they say it's haram to have a credit card because you're making an agreement to pay riba, and that's haram. Okay. Now let's go back to the Yemen thing now. So I sat back. I didn't say anything to them. I was just listening and observing and learning. So some brother said it's haram. You can't have a card. Some brother said no. We have to have a card. It's a necessity. So one brother he asked, if it's haram for us to have debit cards and to get money sent from America or France or the UK, how are we to get money in Yemen? I'm not Yemeni. He says get it sent through Western Union. The brother said. He said Western Union is not haram. It's permissible. It's not the debit card. Type, no problem. So shortly afterwards, I had money sent to me through Western Union. And I had to find out where the closest Western Union was. So when I went to the Western Union, the location when I got out the car was inside of a what? Yemeni bank, huge bank. I have to walk inside of the bank, go up to the window, go up to the teller, the woman with her niqab off, so on and so forth, and give her the details, my ID and information through Western Union via the bank. And the money, the machine is coming out of the what? You understand the point proven here? So we have to be mindful, and we cannot have convenient hypocrisy when it comes to fiqh. This is okay, but this is haram. This is permissible to pay, but you can't pay this. It's permissible to have this debit card, but you can't have a credit card. It's permissible for you to pay taxes and where the tax is being spent, but you can't have a household mortgage. We have to be mindful, brothers. And in a sense, that's the only point that I'm trying to say. Now, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. I hope that Allah Azza wa Jalla has given me the tawfiq in this answer. And I hope that He has not forsaken me in this answer. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabiyina wa imamina Muhammad.